Hi, my name's Glenn Hansen. We're doing this chat today targeted towards parents and coaches. Probably one of the target points here is, parents and coaches of boxing athletes. So we're going to make this a little bit more specific to boxing. Just to give you a little bit of intro on myself, I've been strength and conditioning coaching for 15 years, but coaching in terms of for 27 years. So my main area of interest has been long-term athletic development through that entire phase. And sports that I've worked with include martial arts, boxing, wrestling, swimming. I've had a long history with, like nearly 20 years of history with young developing swimmers. And I tend to probably sit there with team sport, which has been quite a lot of netball and obviously, rugby league, which nearly every single S&C coach in Australia has probably done something with. But my main favourite thing to do would probably be the individual sports and working with individual athletes, and that's probably the mark that I have set myself. And I have probably a deep love and understanding of boxing, having had a father that was quite passionate about it, quite good at it, and put a pair of gloves on me at 3, and mucking around in the backyard and all those things. So I have a deep appreciation of what it takes to do that sport, given that I have seen and felt the impact of the sport. So this chat is a little bit long. You can break it up into a couple of segments, but the target behind it is to educate you as a parent or you as a coach on what you're trying to do with a young athlete that you have that may be talented, or maybe talented as a boxer but not very good in terms of moving, and you understand like what we try to do to help you. So our job is to give you a better athlete. So if you send someone to us, that's our job. It's to give you a more resilient athlete, more injury, less risk reduction, and then also to inspire the athlete to be able to perform as they go through each couple of years of their teenage and childhood development. So it's research based, it's experience based, and I'll try and talk about some experience that I've had and make it as relevant as I can back to boxing, so that as a parent, and a coach, you're sort of feeling where long-term athletic development sits in that boxing sphere. So some objectives, like I always try to put this there. I have a bit of a teaching background as well as coaching, so I always try and put what am I going to cover for you, so you can see that. And the slides sort of follow the general theme here. Look, go to the last slide first, safety. We leave it to last because so you remember it first. I always say to a parent, if you send your kid to a commercial gym and just send them and say off you go, and you are literally feeding them to a wolf pack. One, safety, who are they interacting with? 2, what supplements are they being offered? Because we all like to think it'll never happen to us. Who are they interacting with? Safeguarding, child safety. We always think it'll never happen to us. Again, if you don't know, you don't know. And then things that are really simple that happen to children and adolescents in the gym is things like I dropped this on my finger and then my finger is bent sideways. Things like that happen more often than they should, and that's why we leave this to the last and really emphasise at home, so that you will have those discussions with your child if they are in a commercial facility. But if you want to avoid an injury to a teenage athlete, you supervise them, and that's the most important thing that we do as part of what we coach, and it's critical. Like that's the one thing that you can almost guarantee that if we're supervising well and teaching them safety habits, then those sort of things don't happen. So sport integrity, we cover this first. This is something that I highly recommend you go and look at if you're a parent, and if you're a coach and you haven't looked at this, then you need to. We never think that someone will be considered a drug cheat, because we don't think it'll ever happen to us as a parent or as an athlete or as a coach. Look, I've had one athlete that's been tested in all the years that I've ever coached anyone. One athlete that's tested positive to banned supplements, and it was a purposeful use, and it sort of rips you insides out, because that person told me at the time they were clean. Look, it's a very, very tough thing to deal with. However, I do know of several, and there's been several high-profile cases of accidental use or accidental ingestion of substances. Now, look, if you've got, a lot of money and a lot of legal people behind you, maybe you can, convince someone that you shouldn't be suspended, but a lot of people don't have that. And so if you don't have that, then unfortunately, it's not good for you. So when you're looking at that in Sport Integrity website, it does go through a baseline Clean Sport 101. I highly recommend you do that. It doesn't take very long, and it just gives you some insight into what you need to know as a parent or a coach. If your athlete, that's an underage athlete especially, is asking or talking, or you see supplements in their bag, you need to ask a question, and you need to have a discussion. It needs to be honest. So then safeguarding in sport, like that's talked about a lot. I'm not going to talk about it too much right now, but just remember that you've got to have an open level of communication with your athlete, with your child, and you've got to keep that as in an always sense, because you've got to make sure that people are doing the right thing. And obviously there's so many high profile cases that are going on at the moment in relation to that. So long-term athletic development, into the the nuts and bolts of this now. So Bailey is one of the people that really took this and modelled it so that people could see what it was about. So you can see the diagram there. You can see the long-term athletic development. It goes all the way through until like that 18 level. So we'll talk about that model of a little bit better description of it in the future slides. But long-term athletic development model is at a base of 10 years. I look at the programs that I coordinate at Vector Health is they start at 7 or 8 years of age, and we like to finish that development age at 17, and then long-term athletic development doesn't stop. You keep going. I always look at an athlete in 5 years or 10 years time and go, what am I trying to turn you into? Who are you going to be in 10 years time? What are you going to be able to output for me to help you coach, to help you perform at the highest level that you are capable of performing at? So we always assess the person in front of us. You've got this beautiful model. They could be behind, they could be in front, and it's up to us to make that decision and have that negotiation with the athlete, the coach, the parent, and then place them in the continuum of where they fit right now, not where their age fits into the model. This is our strategy. So it's adapted from a couple of the models that exist, Bailey being one of them. So mobility goes in the middle. And the reason that goes in the middle is because that's the thing that's most important to do all of the other things that you see on the outside. So we like to encourage our athletes to do a really good warm-up where they're going through a range of motion. So it's central to the ability, like the development of other abilities. Getting off the ground quickly, getting into a squat or a lunge position, getting into a good push-up, getting into a rotational pattern, understanding how to use the body from the feet through to what leaves. So in boxing language, if you have an athlete that has poor hip extension, they will not be able to transfer the force from the ground into the force at the hand, and therefore their punching power is usually diminished. It's the same as when they're taking force, so taking hits. If they're a poor mover, then they can't get out of the way quick enough, and if they can't move enough, then they're limited in how far they can move laterally, and that's hard for them. So our job is to try to do that work in the background with an athlete so then they can perform better, and you as a boxing coach could take them and do that performance-based things with them in the sport. Our job there is to try and help them move better. So there's lots of factors that go into this. It could be an injury, there could be an illness, it could be a generalized lack of a movement capability. That's our job to try and work with them at. So this is the basic way I look at LTAD. They're training for fun. That's like that 6 to 10 age group, even 6 to 12. Training to learn is maybe from 10 to 14. So we're just learning patterns. So in terms of programming, the difference between training for performance and training to learn is that you might have 8 patterns to go through in a program and only do 2 to 3 sets. as opposed to training performance. We might give you 5 sets of only 4 patterns because we're trying to get a physical performance factor out, like pure absolute strength or pure absolute power. Whereas in the training to learn, we're trying to expose the athlete to that pattern and have you master the how you're doing it, as opposed to who cares about how much. You know, you've got another 4 or 5 years before I care about how much you can do. And I explain it like that to our athletes because then it takes that pressure away. I don't mind. They can still have their target, you know. An example is there's a 15-year-old young lady that I'm working with at the moment. And she's told me, I want to squat 100 kilos this year. She's going to be 16, squatting 100 kilos. That's a big amount to squat. And will she get there? Possibly. However, the thing that will define that is the how that she does each bit of work every single session, and we talked about that. And I mean, she's a very committed young lass and does the work. So when you got someone like that, you need to you're in between training to learn, training for performance, because I've explained to her that you're not going to just squat every single day because I want you to learn other things. So, you know, as long as they're okay with that, then you've got that balance. And then you always go back and have some fun, but the fun becomes more the social interaction and the training with your friends. Like, that's the fun part, and that needs to stay. But when you're young, being in the gym is fun because you're doing all sorts of cool things that you didn't think you could do. So it turns out from the exercise being fun to the environment being fun. Training for health and fitness is completely different to training for a competitive goal. You know, that can be anything that person wants. Yes, we can tell them the science, but we just want them to do it. So in context, kind of whatever they want to do, they can do, because at least they're doing something. So this is how I sort of explain it to people, what LTAD means. So from 4 to 6 is like foundational movement. So if you're a parent, you know, you get your kids down and crawl and animal movements, and you know, foundation movements is, can you do a push-up? Can you do a squat? Can you lunge for me this way? Can you pick and throw a ball up? Can you catch the ball? Can you roll over and stand up? And can you do a wheelbarrow walk? Those sort of fun things to do, and you do it in the backyard in just 10-minute spurts. My son's the most classic at that. He's been doing pull-ups in the gym ever since he was 3. And when he was 3, he could just hang onto the bar and I'd lift him up and down, and he thought it was crazy. He's 7 now. He's got a very, very light band on. He can do 10 with a light band, 3 with no band, and they're proper pull-ups and they're very good technique. And I mean, I don't think I could do pull-ups like him when I was that age, but it's just because he had the environment put in front of him, and he just comes in and plays. And he's still very much just, do you want to do some pull-ups today, mate? Yep, I'm going to do 5 sets of 3, because he hears me say that to athletes. So he goes, I'm going to do this, and off he goes. And he does it, and it's fun to him. It's just a competition that he's setting himself, but we're not really telling him that he has to do it because he's 7. And that's a good way to put it. Like, don't put too much pressure on. It's like, do you want to play for 10 minutes? So then 6 to 10 is training for fun. So we don't really take children in until they're around 7 or 8. 7 would be the minimum age that we would work with them in a group setting. And that's more because it's maturity, it's safety, and knowing not to go and play with something you shouldn't play with, those sort of things. But it's just body weight training, progressing through a continuum of exercises with an emphasis on having fun, being with your friends, and learning something new. 10 to 12, it's like learning how to train. So now we're trying to teach them this is a process you follow. So it's a little bit of applying the self to see progress and showing them what progress means. Structure, a bit more implemented, and started the bodyweight testing schemes that we'll show you later. And then you start them using the things that they might do in the 13 to 14 age group. So start using dumbbells at the end of that, even really light barbells, broomsticks, pretend they're barbells. Teach them how to do all sorts of manners of movement. So I teach weightlifting, so snatch, clean, push press overhead. I teach that with broomsticks in this age group. My coaches all just chip away with just playing in the warm-up with that type of stuff and just teaching it, because then later on they've already learnt it and they learn quickly. and it's really fun. And weightlifting is the best way, the most evidence-based way anyway, that I can look at over all these years to produce a really powerful athlete. So yes, plyometrics, they're fantastic, and all the rest of the power things are unreal, but picking up and throwing your body weight around or more is quite a, it's a difficult thing to do and highly coordinated. So thinking about, teaching of that age with a light bar when they're 17, then they're starting to hit some good metrics, because I've already had, might have had 7 years of experience at it. So 13 and 14, training for an outcome. So now we start just exposing to some barbell training, exposing them to a little bit more structure in terms of the strength work, start to put a lot more agility and speed and plyometric work into their programming and make it a little bit more defined. So we've exposed them 10 to 12, we put it in the programming at that age. And then from 15 to 18, you start to, some athletes are quite mature at that age and they're really competitive and they've got very set goals, and you start to still expose them to a wide variety, but you're starting to ask questions of, okay, where can we get from here to here? What progressions are we going to make? How are we going to do that? And they want to see that result. So like I said, start narrowing down the focus in each programming element and asking them to execute something that they haven't executed before. So I'll say there's no such thing as sport-specific strength and conditioning. We train general capacity. So the things on the right here, that's what we build. I'll show you a video later where I have made something more specific in a rehab context, which is a little bit different because you're trying to give that person a feel of what they should be doing. However, what am I training there? Well, I'll explain that a little later, but it's not necessarily, I'm not making them a better boxer by doing that activity. I'm exposing them to a stimulus to help them go back to boxing. So anyone that says sport specific, look, if I train a boxer and I can make them hit something harder because they can produce more force, is that sport specific, or did I just build a general component of strength and then they took that to boxing? I would believe that the latter. I built the general capacity, and you as a coach or you as an athlete or as your child, they took that, their coach worked with them, and then they made them a better boxer because of it. So follow the science, not the Instagram feed that you see. You've just got to, things that are cool aren't necessarily right. It's the only thing I'll say to that. So for athletes under 13, if you're playing with that at home or anything like that, your session focus and timing, this is the sort of thing that we might do at Vector. So it's 15 minutes of mobility and foundational patterns, which is included as part of a warm-up. 15 minutes on some bodyweight strength competency during the session. 15 to 20 minutes on learning how to apply force in different planes. So doing a dumbbell incline bench press, doing a cable row, doing a lat pull down, doing a pull up, doing a squat, doing a lunge, so those sort of things. And then 5 to 10 minutes of like flexibility work to self-guide at the end. So using foam rollers, using massage, or self-massage, using some stretching, using a dynamic mobility, those sort of things, using that before and the start, and trying to make that a little bit more of a pattern for them to follow over the years that they train. Some might progress quicker, some might be slower, and some might get stuck here to the next phase. That's okay. I think the key is long-term athletic development. As long-term implies be patient, and that's what we have to be. In a general rule of thumb, the bigger the athlete, the more body weight they carry, the harder it is for them to express force through their body weight. We have to be conscious of that. However, we also have to push them to be able to do it. Because if you have an athlete that can't push their own body weight around, and you're asking them to produce high force and take high force, especially a bigger athlete fighting a bigger athlete, and they can't express and they can't control that force that's being put onto them, then that is a barrier in terms of injury. So we do push them, their competency hard at a younger age if they are bigger, and we try very hard to make that happen, because I'm really conscious that if we don't do that by the time you get to 17, it's still really hard work. So then same sort of thing, 13 to 14, 15 minutes of mobility, 20 minutes of introduction, dumbbell barbell work, and 15 minutes of bodyweight competency, keeping on working on that. And that's just mixed into a program. It's kind of like a flow that we have. We're not going to make them do all that at the start, all that in the middle, all that at the end. It's mixed into the programming. We try and challenge the kids now to start at 13 and 14, for example. Most of our girls, they can write you a very well-rounded, well-structured warm-up with thought and explanation on the why. That is what the teaching part of long-term athletic development should look like. Yes, you can tell them, you can coach them, but we want them to know, we want them to be better than we were when we were young. So I always say, I've got a coach that's 19 years of age at the moment, and laying out warm-ups and writing programs and doing things that I wouldn't have been doing at 19 years of age. But she has this benefit of having a lot of people around her that have got a lot of exposure, and she's really keen and really motivated. If you're a coach or if you're a parent, it's okay to ask tons of questions about what and why, because if you took just the 15 minutes of mobility and foundation patterns and you just worked with your child and you did it with them, one, you'd probably feel heaps better, and two, they'll be better. So that when you start them, if they're not going to start in the gym until they're 14, you've given them that foundational patterns to work through. And then 15 to 18, it might be 5 to 10 minutes, and that's shortened because I expect them to get through the work quicker and be more competent. And then 30 to 45 on progressive strength and power activities. And then a lot of my athletes get 5 to 10 minutes a day on the other days to do, and that makes up their mobility work that I need them to do. And if I write it, I expect it to be done. So as a parent, if you're seeing your child, skip out in that work, you can tell them that's not really good. It's not good enough, because, if you're investing in it and you're paying for that work, or if you're a coach and you're asking your athlete to do that, it's part of the work. And I explain that to the athletes that we have in there. I generally don't have too many problems with athletes not doing the work, because it's all on an app, so they have to record it. So warm-up patterns. So hard, because obviously I'm sitting down and I can't demonstrate everything on this video, but if dynamic mobility means to move, and mobility means to change the range of motion through a joint. So the hip joint's ball and socket joint. So I'm here, it rotates in the socket like that, has a high degree of range of motion. We want to keep that. With boxing, they get some restrictions in range of motion, which actually is good in terms of the ability to bounce off the ground. So we tend to just keep that healthy, because you've got maybe a career after boxing that you don't want to have stiff hips. Thoracic spine is where anything pretty much connected to your rib cage, it's vertebral body. So when we're rotating, if we can't rotate enough, our scapulas, our shoulder blades can't retract enough onto here. So we often see kyphotic posture, which is a rounded posture, like a hunchback. We see that too much in young boxers. We work to get rid of that. Yes, we want you in that shape, but we also want you to get out of that shape, because it's healthy for your body in most cases. So thoracic spine, we work hard on mobility, and that's a lot of the little rework we give every day. Shoulder mobility, really important. Also, shoulder stability is really important. So when we say dynamic mobility, we'll also include stability of the shoulder girdle, because that's a common injury for boxing. And ankle mobility is commonly associated with squat and running mechanics. Not enough dorsiflexion. So if my ankle is this, it's the ability to pull my toes up, so to speak. So it's called dorsiflexion. And if we squat, we kind of need that. We need that bending part like that to bend, so that we can get into a good range of motion in a squat and a lunge. So we tend to work on that, especially at a younger age. Foundational movements include any lunging, any squatting, any animal patterns, bear crawl, spider crawl, log roll, or anything like that. Then crawling, so any crawling base patterns, just because it's bimanual coordination, which for boxing is good, because you need that, because you often work through a contralateral like rotation when you're hitting off your power hand. And if you're hitting on a jab hand, you're actually working on ipsilateral, so same side leg arm. Pushing or pulling, so can I push something hard, can I pull something? And rotation and anti-rotation. So anti-rotations like taking contact, bang, take, and then rotate back out of that contact. And rotation is, reaching a jab, reaching across right, in a hook position, that sort of thing. So They're sort of things that we want to see our young athletes develop over the years. And some do it quickly, and some have it naturally, and some have to work really hard to get that type of work done. So this is like some bodyweight session patterns, like a bilateral, so 2 legs, 1 leg is single or uni leg, split leg pattern, a jump and land pattern, because we want them to control that before we get them to jump higher. We want them to do glute and hamstring work in between the squat actions, just because we know that a lot of people have weaker hamstrings than they should compared to their quadriceps, and that's a risk of injury. So we tend to program that into actions. And then upper body is like a push-up. Inverted row is like under a barbell or something like that, and pulling yourself horizontally. So it's one of the ways we get people ready to do pull-ups. Then progression to pull-up, then medicine ball or throwing, and then rotational patterns can be progressed in many ways, starting from a rotational crunch to then more open chain like throws and catches with a medicine ball. Anyone who follows Harry Garside, you'll see the S&C coach that works with him gets him to do a lot of work with stepping and throwing a medicine ball into a wall, and that's like the end part of the development in terms of rotation, because that might look really easy to do. It doesn't look like there was no heavy weight there, but the speed and the efficiency, the way he does that, is quite challenging to maintain. So core patterns to encourage, so planking. Most boxers are really good at this. You'll find that they're way better than the average because they kind of have to be. But planking, there's a couple of technique things that when we work with people we might go through, but you should be able to plank for a minute if you're maybe 12, 2 minutes if you're 14 to 15 quite comfortably. We don't test it beyond that because once you can do it, then we move on to something more challenging. Any 4-point holds, like, that's like your quadruped, so hands and feet, like in a crawl position, they're really good progressions from planks. And oblique sling holds is anything like on a lateral bridging, like side planking, holding weight here, like a band or a cable against a force where you're stepping, and that's like digs into some of your anti-rotation work. And then crunching and extension variation, so you've got to mix those up so that you're not just doing all the flexion work. You've still got to do some extension work as well to balance the body, and that's part of that postural change that we talk about. So then the set pattern, so just explaining like what we try to do, and I don't expect that maybe I'm not gonna go into detail here, but let's say we try and get 12 to 24 sets of work in a session. So that is from the start to the finish. It doesn't sound like a lot over an hour because it's one set every 2 to 3 minutes, but once you're teaching, once you're doing, once you're watching, some people will come into a junior athlete development session and go, none of these kids are sweating and they're not working hard, they're not puffing. Well, if you want to get puffed, go and skip or go and run up and down a hill. Strength isn't about being puffed, it's about challenging the body under metabolic stress and mechanical stress. And there's the biggest part of strength that we get as a young athlete is called neuromuscular adaptation, which is essentially 3 things. It's the recruitment of the muscle fibers that you already own. So we want to increase that recruitment. We want to increase the speed at which they're recruited, and we want to try and recruit the biggest muscle fibers in the action by getting faster, and therefore we're going to synchronize better. So we want to synchronize the muscle fibers that are developed, like the force, and then we want to get it done quicker so that we can recruit quicker and therefore engage more force. None of that takes metabolic effort. None of that takes getting your heart rate up. A lot of it just takes thinking about what you're doing and how you're doing it. So if you walk into a gym session at Vector, you're not going to see kids getting flogged on assault bikes or running up and down the hill or whatever we have. You're going to see kids like a lot of it is a social atmosphere and getting stronger. And it's really important. Like boxing has this culture of if you're not dying, you're not working hard enough. Well, in the gym, you don't have to die because you're trying to make your athlete better. So the gym is actually some of the easiest sessions you get your kids to do in the week, which is good because then you're not, smashing them, which is a word that I don't like to really use as part of what I do. And I do conditioning work and I write programs for it, but you've got to target, you've got to have a target. So the calmer I am, the harder I'm working someone sometimes, because if I'm really energetic and over the top and I've got someone at 95% of their max heart rate holding it for 2 minutes, then you're already anxious when you're like that. So we want to be careful about the temperature that we set in the room. And in the gym, we set it at a calm temperature. If we get the temperature too high, that's when you get accidents as well. So because they can't think, they're too tired, they're too fatigued. So that's just a little bit of context in the way that I work. Now, not everyone agrees with that, but I've been at the AIS seeing, I was lucky enough to be there when the junior Australian team were there working with the head of the gym, essentially, like he's the head coach in there. And Ross is a guy, he's got a very good history in his own sport and then a very good career at the AS, and he's just so calm with those guys. And they were working a little bit, they were doing a circuit work, but it's hard enough, but don't work harder than you need to in the gym. So if that's the level that he sets there, I'm sure that we can set that in a club standard or a junior athlete standard. What I've seen in the past with boxing athletes is their movement literacy overall. They're fantastic at boxing, but when you put them inside of a gym room and you get them to move, sometimes they really struggle because they haven't been exposed to that level of thought process before. So don't be afraid to take it, strip it right back, do basic things, but just do them really well. Just like when you taught your athletes or your child got taught to jab or whatever, they do it 100 times, they do it really well. It's the same thing with any basic gym activity. So we start there at 6 and we might get right up to 12, even 15, so that they're proving that they can hold that pattern for a little bit longer. So I'm not going to go through these too much because you can come back and look at these later, but if you were testing someone, these are, and there's a picture just after this showing you what the tests are. Your front hover holds, from testing competency for males, twisting sit-ups, one leg standing on a box, full squats in 30 seconds with 25% of their body weight, and push-ups and pull-ups, underhand grip. That's a basic testing thing of a young athlete, like a under 18 athlete. So to pass, you're trying to score 18 points. So you can see there, if you score 5 points for everything, you're flying. So we test this on a regular basis in our facility. However, we might not test it all at once. We'll be doing that at the end of programming, and we're just keeping an eye on the progression there. One of the hardest things for the kids to get is the pull-up one. Like we start them really young now because that's the thing that people struggle with in general, and we've really noticed that in the last 10 years. It's gotten much harder. Then girls, so a little bit different. Some of the results there, some of the results a little less, especially the pull-ups. Females in general will always have less upper body strength than males will in comparison. Sometimes they don't like hearing that, and especially I'm a bloke, and I'm telling, if you're a girl or a woman listening, please know that it's nothing to do with what we think, it's what we've seen over the years. However, what is really cool is in the last probably 5 years, what I'm seeing is the females that are coming into our facility are actually holding really strong with the boys, probably until they go through that pubescent age group where testosterone might kick in, growth hormone, and then there's a bit of that separation. However, we are seeing a lot more stronger females than we've ever seen in our junior program come through, which is really cool. And we don't really treat the girls and boys too much different. We still strive them to push over the testing results. So, we've got a couple of girls at the moment that are plus 20 push-ups, so that's really great. And we've got a couple of girls that are plus 6, quite a few girls, sorry, that are plus 6 chin-ups. So it's really good to see. And I've probably coached more elite level female athletes and elite level male athletes in my career, however that's worked. And so, yeah, I really push the agenda and try and get as strong as possible. And I encourage that. So if you have a daughter and you're listening as a parent, look, start modeling that. Do push-ups, do planks, do things with them when they're really young, when they're lightweight, so then they get used to pushing their own body weight, and then it's easier once you put them in the gym. That'd be my key message that I try and get girls into the gym really young, so then we can get that strength to body weight stuff flying, and then once they're there, then it's a lot easier just to transgress them up the chain. So these are the 6 bodyweight tests here, just basic each test being, underhand pull-up, is like a reverse grip. So I'm sitting there like this. I'm not overhand, so that's a lot easier. A little bit my biceps get pulled there. So you're trying to pull your chin over the bar. That's the test, and full hang. Then you've got the squat, goblet squat. So that's an example of a full squat there. So I've got the hip and the knee at least the same height. One-legged squat is like a pistol squat, so it's a full depth squat. They can be really hard to achieve, and it's really important that you help them with balance at the start when you're testing that, then try and progress them with no balance. All right, so testing is just an indicator of performance. I explain the purpose, I explain why we're doing it, and also say I don't really care what you get today, because I just want you to do as best as you can. You do expect some fluctuation in that. I've had plenty of boys and girls go up and down in the push-ups and the pull-ups, and the squatting is fairly stable, but the upper body, especially with growth, can be quite different. We just use the testing to steer our athletes to where they want to go or need to go. We don't sit there and put a board up and go, oh, well, you're the best or you're the worst. That's not really what we're about as an organisation either. So we mainly use it as a programming tool for us and a feedback tool for them. So this is probably the stuff. Maybe I hope you've survived 36 minutes of me ranting on. Obviously, this is an area that I've spent a lot of time in, and I'm trying to keep it concise, but give you some context. This is probably the stuff that's really interesting if you're a parent or a coach or you're a boxer watching this. So, posture, kyphosis, talked about that before, the whole rounded shoulders, hunchback kind of posture. That's something that we aim to try and get you out of. So we'll program to get you out of that, especially if you come to us with it. Because what we see is you can't rotate and you can't produce enough power when you like that. It's really old school and it's sort of gone away now. We try and help you move better in and out of that posture. Bone loading, so hand fractures, unfortunately really common, and it's something you need to be really mindful of as a parent as well, and watching that, and as a coach. So I'm not going to go too much into that because it's really an orthopedic or a physiotherapy kind of thing. But if you experience, hand or bone pain, you need to take your child to the doctor and get them x-rayed, or at least do a physio and get it checked over. Don't sit on it for 6 weeks. That'll be my general guys. Rotation and lower back. So probably most of the rehab that I've done with boxing is in lower back injuries, and that's from probably just poor technique in rotation. Hip mobility plays a part there, as does thoracic mobility. So again, just restoring the function of the body, improving core stability, improving the ability to rotate effectively, and then take them back to boxing. But we'd like to think that we can stop more of those injuries by getting in and working with boxing athletes a bit younger. So then force reduction. So think about how you connect through the ground to the person that you're going to try and punch. We want to try and create the maximum amount of force that comes out of your hand so that you can create the most amount of impact with each punch that you land. So that's what our job is in terms of performance land. And it doesn't have to be, getting as strong as physically possible. Like I said, part of that neuromuscular is connecting the brain and the body and getting them to work together better. So it's called a kinetic chain. So it starts off the ground where your foot's planted, and then where you transfer force through to your hand. We want to get that to work better. Then there's absorbing force. So that goes into your concussion, neck, whiplash injury. There's a lot of work being done in the UFC in particular on neck injuries and concussion, and how we can strengthen someone's neck to make them less likely to have a concussion or a neck injury. So we do some basic isometric strength work of people like boxing athletes' neck, and show them how to do that, and then start them on that like it's called micro dosing, where we're giving a little bit every day, kind of like the mobility stuff we were talking about. Absorbing force again is that core strength or stability, really locking in tight to making sure that you have enough muscle, have enough strength to hold someone leaning onto you, wrestling. That happens in the ring sometimes, so that you can hold your position and not be shunted off your position every time, therefore you lose your position in the ring. So that's what we think about. Is like, we might watch you box or watch you how you move, and then we might take that into the gym and say, we need to teach you to move in a more effective fashion and hold a pattern better, and then try and draw relevance back to you. And then aerobic fitness, so that's just sustaining efforts. So not every single boxer needs to run, and I know that might be very controversial, but running and boxing have had a long association, like, let's go on 10K road runs and all that sort of thing. Some athletes are not designed to run because their hips just don't like it, their knees, their ankles, their feet. So if you're a parent and if you're a coach watching this, you've got an athlete and you're trying to get them to run with everyone, it's not working, then that's where you need to come and talk to someone like us, because we can figure that out for you and make it so that they can still box and they can still get fit. There is ways to get someone fit without running. We've done it before and it does work. It just takes a bit of thought, a bit of programming, and a lot of the time it's just educating and working together with you, and or if you're the coach or the parent and the coach, just working together with the athlete to make sure that they understand why running isn't a good idea right now. Might not be forever, but right now, if it's causing problems, what's the point of causing your athlete a big problem in a run? They're there to box, they're not there to be running. And you've got to look at that as a simple and effective sort of, what's the problem? Is the problem every time they go for a run, they're coming back sore? That is a problem, and you're probably not equipped to deal or fix that problem. So that's what we do, and that's what our physios do. So then things like absorbing force, what we try and do for you, we try and get you to absorb force better. We get you to produce higher amounts of force. We connect and synchronize that movement, and then we try and monitor and manage asymmetry, which is a stronger one side than another. We try and manage and try and monitor that. It's very common in boxing. You can't really get rid of it, but we try and bring it down. Asymmetry is an injury risk in general, so we try to bring that down, and we try and work on erasing or controlling that as we go with someone. So I just thought I'd show this video. This is a video of one of an athlete that I work with that was a talented junior boxer. So this is an example of where he had an injury that stopped him from boxing. We had to bring him back into a boxing realm, and we wanted to do something that inspired his ability to react to a stimulus and to put him in a stance where he had to hold a particular boxing stance for a while and move and duck and rotate and get out of the way and hit something and catch something, just to see how his body tolerated this. So this is early entry, getting ready to go back into boxing. So I'll just play this and I will mute it because you don't really need to hear what I'm saying. And I'll talk through what we're doing. So you can see here that we've got him in a boxing stance, and I've got a ball and I'm throwing it into that wall, and I'm throwing it close to and around his head region on purpose because I want him to move out of the way. And I've got him up against the wall because I do not want him to move back. I want him to only move laterally, or he's got to step forward. So then we start playing with a bigger ball where he's got to snap and catch it. So it's just hand-eye coordination, and it's picking a target and hitting the target. And at the start, I'm throwing it wherever it goes. I'm not really worrying about where it goes here. I'm just getting him to lean in and catch it. It's not perfect here either because, we went back and we reviewed that and we said, we've got to make this quicker, and we've got to get him to move forward and split his stance every time. So you can see here he's in a square stance and he has to split it. So that's just tolerating force absorption. So I'm absorbing his force into the ground, and he's got to catch that, and checking in with him all the time about how is your injury, what is going on with it, are you feeling good? We progressed that drill to be, like 20 balls in a row out of a bucket. So kneel on the ground and just throw the ball at the athlete, and you're not even looking at them, and they're up against the wall. They've got to actually advance towards you, so the reaction time keeps getting shorter. They're the sort of things that you might do at the end when you're saying to an athlete, I believe that you're ready to go back, and you've shown me that. We've done 2 to 3 minutes here. We've done some hard fitness work. We've done it in between the fitness work. You're mentally good. How does your body feel? You get a 9 out of 10. I'm feeling great. And then he went back successfully and did very well in his next fight. So that's an example of where you might think a bit outside the box and say, well, I've got to give you something that sees you, where you can see what you're going to do next. So so that's a little bit of there, but we still want to go back to the basics. So like I said before, apply and absorb, do the above quicker, increase the peak amount capability, sustain force at a higher level for a higher work rate for a longer time. So that's the fitness of force production, like strength and power endurance. And that's not done sometimes with high amounts of crazy sweat. That's done in sets of maybe up to 25 of something, or it's done in fast sets of 3 with shorter rest periods so that you can maintain technique and maintain force output. So then just a little bit of advice based on 27 years of life in coaching. So in LTAD, how you do something is more important than how much or how fast you do it. That is a standard. So you get the how you do it first, then you worry about how fast. Our role is to expose our athletes to the widest variety of exercises. Talked about that before. That's just to allow them to develop, so that then when it matters, we can put pressure on them to perform. We're not worrying about teaching them the most basic thing to do. That's why early entry into these sort of programs are so important, because then we can do all that when they're young, when it doesn't really matter. And then we can, when it really matters, when they're 17 and they're trying to gun for a national title, it's going to project them into the amateur ranks, or it's going to project them into somewhere that, in a professional boxing career, then we can put pressure on them to get really strong and create knockout power, or whatever you want to call it. And then build competency, not competition, as a culture setting. So really drive the how you do it and really reward that. Yes, competition's a natural thing. You put a bunch of athletes together, they're going to compete with each other. But if you keep driving the how, then that's going to project into performance. So safety, last thing. So we talked about this a bit before, but we're going to just remind everyone the most important thing. We want you to keep turning up to the gym over and over and over again for years without having to say, oh man, like I broke my finger because I didn't look what I was doing and I dropped a dumbbell on it. That's bad, because then you can't lift anything for a while, and then you can't get better, and then, that's not cool. So pay attention to what you're doing. If you're an athlete watching this, maybe your parents, fast forward right to the end, that's okay. This is the most important thing you'll ever hear. Pay attention to what you're doing every single time, and learn from your near misses, because you'll have at least one of them when you mistake something. So jamming fingers, dropping thing on your feet. If you drop a medicine ball on your foot, it's probably going to be okay. If you drop a 5 kilo plate directly across the mid part of your foot, it'll stop you from jumping for a couple of days, and maybe it'll break your foot, and then you're in a moon boot, and then you can't box, and then, well, you missed 8 weeks that your competition didn't. Most injuries happen when you're in a period of unsupervised time. If you have a home gym at home and you're letting your 12-year-old use it, you are taking a big risk. So please, people have, I don't mean to be extreme, but people have died that are under 18 in the gym unsupervised. It's not a very good thing to happen. And everyone says those things don't happen to me, but it's really important supervision. So I know we're all busy, but if you've got a home gym and the kids are going in it, please just be there, at least to erase the things that you can't take away. And then collision, so in the gym space, tight gym space, being unaware of surroundings. So if you've got athletes doing weightlifting activities and then you're doing body weight work right beside it, that's not a very good idea. You've got to have a clear designated space for things. So if you're in your boxing gym and you run S&C work, have design spaces for athletes to do things. If you're doing things like kettlebell swings, or you're doing fast pressing or medicine ball throws, especially if you've got younger and older athletes mixed up, you have an area for the young, have an area for the older, and be very blunt with this is your room, this is your room, don't cross over. And if you're working in a circuit, think about how you structure that so that all danger activities are done in a specific area. So then one coach probably hangs in that area, and then the things that are less likely to cause a problem maybe are done in another space, and a coach can be floating through there as well. So that just your setup of the way you might do things is really important. And then You still get unsupervised issues with 13 to 18-year-olds. We've had plenty of pars fractures, which is like a wedge fracture of the lower back from heavy lifting from the ground. If I was designing an LTAD program with a coach that maybe didn't have the experience level, the things to avoid is heavy lifting from the ground, and probably anything where you're putting a large amount of axial load, which is compression load in your spine. So if you don't have a lot of experience, I would do things like single leg work, which means the weight is generally lighter. I'd think about being very careful of lifting straight from the ground, because that's when athletes will lose their spine shape and complain of pain. And a lot of taller athletes, and a lot of boxers in particular, have spine shapes that make them more prone to those fractures. So they're sort of things that you want to avoid, because they can put an athlete out for a year, up to a year of work. So poor technique, in my opinion, over 20 odd years, it does matter. Some athletes will get away with just working really hard and getting away with it. They'll get away with it for a while. It could be 20 years before it pays that dividend back to the athlete and says, well, that's for doing, round back deadlifts for 20 years. This is the spine degeneration that's caused. But we can't say sometimes whether that's the direct result, but sometimes you'll get a surgeon that'll come back to you and say, this person will not be able to weightlift after they have this surgery. And that can be quite a tough thing to have that conversation with someone. So it's rare in that context, but poor technique in terms of, especially the faster you do something, it really does matter. So that's where supervision and teaching and taking the time is definitely worth it. And that's why at a younger age, the pressure is sort of on us to get that right. And then awareness of surroundings I talked about before, but you've got to talk about it, and you've got to talk about what's happening. So every single session you run, everyone should be together at the start. Hey, this is what's happening today. This is what we're doing. This testing over here, there's this session here, there's this happening. Look, I've got 2 pros today that are in the ring sparring. Might be a great opportunity for your watch. So we're going to do a 40-minute circuit instead of 50, and you're going to spend 10 minutes watching at the end, because then you're not looking back and you're not getting kids playing with things that they shouldn't. Everyone's over there watching. It's just the simple things that really matter. So I'm quite firm with that, with the awareness of surroundings, and I'm always on to that with the athletes that I coach. It's kind of just like parenting, I suppose. So just a bit of a summary. Obviously, I appreciate it's 52 minutes of time that you've spent if you've listened to all of this, and I appreciate you taking the time. I hope it's been really beneficial. The messaging that I've tried to get across is so that you can take that away and have conversations with your child. And if you're a coach, you can plan accordingly. I hope the information in here has been enough that you could go away and create some basic programming that's going to work for you. And if there's any questions, you're more than welcome to reach out. I'm always happy to have a chat about, the development of athletes. It doesn't matter where you are in terms of location either. So we work in Rockhampton, in Yeppoon, face to face with athletes. I work online with a number of athletes, and so do a couple of my coaches. We're more than happy to do that and work virtually. We've got a really good setup in terms of the ability to instruct. We try to negotiate with people to come and see us for maybe stay for a couple of days at the start, and just so that we can have face-to-face time and set you up, test and get you right, especially if it really matters to you in terms of athletically or performance-wise. And we try and set you up on a plan that's suitable for you. The junior programs that we coordinate, we've run for over 15 years now at Vector Health. We run them in school term and holiday time. They're based on group-based. You start at anywhere from 8 years of age, and you first work in a group supervised by a coach per group, and then you progress to more individualised programming as you progress through the ranks of that learn how to train, learn how to compete kind of model. And depending on your level of exposure, experience and proficiency, it's like how you might get coached in that setting, because it's always supervised. It's just that you might have a little bit more of of exposure to doing things under lesser supervision, so that then you, as you get closer to the end of school, you're kind of used to that. So if you just want to go to a gym post, you know you can walk in and do it. However, we also work with athletes in smaller groups and on a one-to-one level, depending on the goal and the condition. Especially with rehab, we might work one-to-one. My contact details are up there. I hope you've enjoyed the discussion, the presentation, and if there's any questions, like I said, you're more than welcome to reach out and ask me any question you like. Thank you very much for listening. Much appreciated.